meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Yes. Pledge of Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. We will start with the consent agenda. To make a motion on the consent agenda.
I move the consent agenda.
There's a second. Second, Bush. Would anyone like to pull any of the items on the consent agenda? I just want to make, Mr. Sanchez.
Yes, I'd like to pull item I. Approval of revised policy 1312, request from the public for problem resolution.
Anyone else want to move anything? I just want to make note that on two of the policies, we had to add legal references. I don't think they need to be pulled from the agenda for that, but I just wanted to tell you that some references will be added to policy 1251.1 and 1312. All right, so we'll vote on all of these consent agenda items except for I. All those in favor? Unanimous. All right, Mr. Stansel on I.
Sorry, I'm scrolling here. Thank you. I have several problems with this policy, not the least of which is the belief and the language that everything, A, must flow through the superintendent, and B, that there can be no anonymous complaints. We are representatives of the public. They elect us. And while I understand that anonymous complaints sometimes are difficult to investigate, there are certainly situations which warrant them and certainly times that they need to be investigated. And to simply say that we will disregard any such complaint, I think is a bad idea on our part. I'd like to know what the impetus behind this policy is, why we're making these changes. Is there some flood of anonymous complaints that we're not aware of that would require us to do this? Thank you.
I can answer that last question. We are going through the policy book and revising every policy in the book, and we are in the 1,000 sections right now, so this is the policy that came up. And we are comparing our current policies with CAVE's policies, and after reading ours compared to theirs, sometimes we prefer their language. So that's the answer to that question. Does anyone else want to respond to some of Mr. Stanz's opening comments? Mr. Holt?
I just have a question. And the question is the policy committee, when it was reviewed, was this unanimously agreed upon by the policy committee, or was there debate in the policy committee over this policy? Do you know?
No, it was unanimous.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Holt?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve policy 1321. I'm sorry, 1312. 1312. Okay, I have the wrong part. That policy, as presented by the policy committee.
Is there a second? Mr. Corner. Any other comments? Mr. Stanton?
I'll make one more comment, just in an attempt. We are the elected representatives of the people in this room, of the taxpayers, and it is entirely appropriate that they be allowed to bring complaints to us, and that from time to time those complaints may in fact be anonymous. Thank you.
All right, there is a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Mr. Stanton? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, item 2.0, Secretary's Report. 2.1, opportunity for the Board of Education to add or delete agenda items. Mr. Gould?
Would like to add from the pack, from everybody's yellow folder this evening, there's a approval for an MOA. So I'd like to see that added as item 5.5. And I anticipate that we'll go into executive session on this since it's dealing with a contract.
Is there a second on that motion? Mrs. Bush?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Any other items to add or delete to the agenda tonight? Okay, item 2.2, Rockville High School Student Representative Report. Olivia?
Good evening. So there's been a lot going on at Rockville since I last saw you. We have midterms coming up starting this Thursday. Some people are really nervous. Some seniors are really excited since they don't have to go in because some of their courses are half year. So their midterm is their final exam. So 85 or higher and they get to go. So I know a lot of seniors are like, yeah, they're so excited. They've waited for this for so long. The Eastern Region Festival was over the weekend. Friday, students left at 1 o'clock and didn't come home until 9, and then left at 8 in the morning and put on a really great show. I was unable to attend due to a concussion, but I hear it was really spectacular this year, as always. And so we had 12 students participating, which was a really good representation of what we have to offer. Sports teams are actually doing really well this year. The boys basketball team is standing out. We've had some really impressive wins against competitive teams, and so I know the pep band's going, and there's getting a lot of support, which I think really helps them out. Also, the hockey team is having another great year, so hopefully we'll get another championship, but we'll see. Let's see. Book club, there's been a lot of exciting stuff going on. Mrs. Nordland recently went to a conference in Boston and spoke to many authors and has actually convinced like 4 of them to either Skype with book club after school or during lunches, so we can ask questions and see what it's like to be an author and what the hardships of it or different aspects of it that you wouldn't really think of, such as, you know, costs and publication and, you know, do you like the cover of your book? Do you not like it? Because they don't really have a say in that stuff. And we actually have 2 coming into the school, and one of them is actually going to stay for our book club. And so it's going to be really exciting. I think it's a great opportunity for kids who really actually enjoy reading and take time out of their lives to do so. Lastly, the murder mystery is going on January 31st to February 1st. If you get a chance to walk around Rockville, you'll see mugshots with all the different characters. This year it's Who Killed Honor, and it's all of the villains trying to claim that they did it. So I encourage you all to go. It's a great show. It's good for kids. It's good for anyone. It's just a good laugh, and it's completely student written, and it's a great thing every year. So I encourage you all to attend. One thing I wanted to just bring to the board was one thing that's kind of been trending, I guess, on social media is a video, and it's Logan LaPlante, and he talks about school hacking. And this boy's 13 years old, and he gave a TED Talk at Nevada University, and it's about education outside of the classroom and how he was withdrawn from school and the benefits that he's had in balancing being happy, healthy, and education rather than keeping them separate. So I thought it might be interesting for you to take a look at. It's 10 minutes long, and it was a really interesting perspective that balanced creativity and education. So I thought it would be interesting for you to see. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Olivia?
I just wanted to say that I was at the winter concert, and it was really a beautiful event. It just warmed my heart to see everyone come together at the end, and the combination of the middle school and the high school, and then the Messiah at the very end. It was really great to bring the community into it as well, and I know you participated in it. And I just wanted to commend the band and the chorus and the community working together to bring this event.
Thank you. I'll pass it on.
Any other questions for Olivia? Thank you very much, Olivia. All right, we'll move on to item 3.0, Community Forum. Opportunity for comments on agenda items, potential future agenda items, or general information provided to the board from citizens and community organizations. Is there anyone who would like to address the board this evening?
Tanya Damon, Merrill, 138 Grove Street. I've requested this before, I'm gonna request it again. When you all do policies, I really would like it to be like where you put it on the agenda, we hear it, and then we come back and you don't vote on it on the exact night. You just basically stifled some of our community from speaking to you by a policy that you just passed. And most of our community has no clue. And that's because the communication tools are not there. You know, you have to sign up for the board packet, but most people don't know that. I've done my best to help with social media to get the board packet out. But you're stifling communication from the people who elect you. I don't understand that. I really don't. Where is the transparency? That's what I would like to know. I mean, not to be totally sarcastic, but even when we do email you and it's not anonymous, most of you don't respond. We get absolutely no response if we send an email, even to the board chairman. Any of the officers, there's no response. And that's really sad to me, really sad. I thought I read somewhere on the district website that there would be public comment after the budget presentation. You didn't allow us to have a public comment.
I don't believe that was on the agenda.
I thought I read it on the district website. I could be wrong, but I'm almost positive I read it on the district website.
It was going to be during this meeting. I did not see that.
That's not what the notice of all of the budget meetings. I could have misread it.
The other budget meetings, but.
Now it said at the end of the presentation, there would be time for public comment.
I'm sorry, I did not see that.
And I think that you need to hear
I
it.
think the agenda that was filed with the town.
And I understand that, but then you're giving us misinformation. Some people showed up. They were a little surprised there was no public comment. Those were their little murmurs as they were leaving. I just think that you need to hear from us. We elect you. I'm sorry, you may not like what comes out of our mouths, but we should have a turn. That's why we elect you. You're not taking polls of what we want to see or hear. Please, I'm asking you, open the doors of communication. Almost every survey this district has set out in the last 3 years, the biggest complaint people have is there's no communication. And you've proved it again tonight, and it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. I need you to have transparency. I'm asking you as a taxpayer. I need transparency. I need you to hear me. If I send an email, I do express something, received, whatever. You guys need to be, and now you're not going to take anonymous concerns or complaints? Really? Wow, that's really telling to me of where we stand as a body on this side of the table, and it's really disheartening. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the board this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4.0, personnel. 4.1, teacher request for child rearing leave. Dr. Conway.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fisher. We have a teacher at Vernon Center Middle School who has been on maternity leave, and then following that, child rearing leave. She is requesting an additional 3 weeks to stay out and come back February 3rd, rather than January 9th, which was last week. Mr. Harrison has recommended that the board approve this, and so therefore so do I. It's unpaid leave.
Mr. Stanton.
I'd like to make a motion that the Vernon Board of Education approve an unpaid leave of absence for childbearing for Janine McDonald from January 9th, 2014 through January 31st, 2014.
Is there a second? Mrs. Bush.
Second.
Any comment or questions? All those in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Item 4.2, administrator retirement. Dr. Conway.
Mr. Wiley, he was here a little while ago, he left. Mr. Wiley has decided, a former member of this board actually, has decided that he will retire at the end of this school year. He will absolutely be missed. He has a calm demeanor that keeps everything in check, and he has brought many kids back to the district and solved many problems really before they've begun, before they start to fester. So he will be missed.
I'd like to make a motion that the Board of Education accept with gratitude for his service to the children of Vernon the retirement of Roger Wiley, supervisor of special education grades 6 to 12, effective at the end of the 2013-2014 school year.
Mr. Polina? Any comments? All those in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
We move on to general business, item 5.0. 5.1, review of the alcohol and drug use student survey report.
Thank you very much. We have a presentation. You have the full report in your packet, and we have an executive summary prepared for you. The two people before you are Bonnie Smith, Master's in Public Health, and she is going to share the presentation with you by Erase. And Mr. Alan Slovene from our Youth Service Bureau is here as well, and it was really under his request that we're doing this. The data not only helps us, having current data, apply for grants because it is current, but it also helps us target the children in the Vernon area with what kinds of programs we really think that we might need and be able to improve their lives. So I will turn this over to Ms. Smith and Mr. Slovene.
Thank you so much for having us tonight. And
Pull that very, very close.
Okay. Closer. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Alan, did you have any remarks?
Good evening, thank you. I just wanted to emphasize the strong partnership that I'm sitting here this evening as chair of the Vernon Drug and Alcohol Prevention Council. That council has formed a very strong partnership with the race and going beyond a decade. I can remember when we undertook one of our first surveys back in 2000, which allowed us to get a baseline, and what we're hoping to do is get some sense of if all the prevention activities that are happening in the community are having an impact on use trends and where we need to continue our focus. So I thank Bonnie very much for all the work that Erase has provided for the town and the information you are about to hear.
Well, I'm grateful we've been able to provide this survey report to you. We've had federal funding for the past 10 years that has enabled us to do, over 20 surveys in the area. So we have regional data as well, of course, town-specific data as well. And I'll show you how Vernon compares to the region, the state, and the nation later in the presentation. But I'll get moving. I should probably tell you what Erase is. We are an independent nonprofit organization that works with 13 other communities in the area to do substance abuse needs assessment and find funding the best that we can to help plan for evidence-based strategies around behavioral health and substance abuse prevention. So the survey was administered in May and June of 2013 to both the Vernon Center Middle School and the high school. So the sample consists of students in grades 6 through 12. Parents participated in passive consent, meaning they could opt their children out of the survey if they chose. Students' participation was up to them as well. If they chose not to participate during the classroom period, it was a paper survey. They just sat and did their work quietly. Surveys were anonymous, and 10% of the data was randomly selected once it was input into Excel and transferred into the statistical package for social science software. So the overall sample was representing almost 87% of the student population, with a range by grade going from 75 to 94% of each grade. And you'll see below the demographics of the students that have participated. This represents the past month or 30-day use of what we call core drugs. That includes alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, and prescription drugs. We call them core drugs because that is what the federal government requires us to measure in our surveys for the purpose of reporting, and it also behooves communities to have this specific data if they're interested in acquiring federal grants related to substance abuse prevention. So you can see here that the substance of choice by the high school students is marijuana, followed by alcohol, then cigarettes. And for middle school, it follows a similar trend, well, with actually the prescription drugs being the substance of choice, then marijuana, tied with cigarettes. We asked students their perceived risk of using these drugs regularly. And you can see here that in grades 9 through 12, the highest risk, perception of risk, is cigarettes, followed by prescription drugs, and that's a similar trend for the grade 6 through 8. The lowest perceived risk across the board is marijuana. A similar question is asked about students' perception of their parents' disapproval. How would their parents feel about them using the substance? And it's perceived that parents would most disapprove of prescription drugs, and then followed in the high school by cigarettes, then alcohol, and lastly marijuana. And grades 6 through 8, it's a little bit more consistent, not a great statistical difference, but the lowest perceived parental disapproval would be around alcohol. Again, a similar question is asked about peers or friends. How much would your friends approve or disapprove of your regular use of these substances? And in middle school, it's a very similar pattern to the parent disapproval. The prescription drugs are perceived as friends most disapproving. The same for high school, but the overall friend disapproval rates are lower, and the disapproval rate of marijuana is the lowest, as you can see in green. This is the part I'm actually most excited to present to you today, and because Vernon has participated in 3 surveys over the past 13 years, we're able to show you this trend data, which is really quite remarkable. All of the substances have either reduced by a significant amount or remained approximately the same, which is excellent news. You can see that alcohol has dropped from almost 50% of youth in grades 9 through 12 having used alcohol in the past 30 days to 15.5% in our current survey. Binge drinking follows a similar pattern of having reduced from 26% in 2000 to about 10%. And in our survey, binge drinking is defined as 4 or more drinks in one occasion. The driving under the influence of alcohol has reduced as well. Tobacco has remained about the same since 2009, as well as marijuana, and prescription drugs are slightly up. But what I can say about marijuana and prescription drugs being slightly up, I'm actually quite pleased to not see that they're higher, because anecdotally, when you talk to people in prevention and mental health treatment, and even in school systems outside of Vernon, you'll hear that kids are using a lot of marijuana, given the current political environment, and using a lot of drugs not prescribed to them by a doctor. And our data are not actually reflecting that, which is really quite pleasing. And then compared to the rest of the region, this is 5 communities that have surveyed with Erase in the 2012-2013 school years. We've aggregated the data, and we can see here that Vernon is coming in having a lesser use rate for past months in grades 9 through 12 for alcohol, as well as binge drinking, slightly higher for tobacco, really nominally higher for marijuana, prescription drugs a little bit higher than the region, and driving under the influence, which is only asked of students in grade 11 through 12, since those are the only students eligible to drive because of their age. So these data look good as well to me. And when we compare to the nation, we use the Youth Risk Behavioral Surveillance System, also known as YRBSS, which is a CDC survey process. And we use that because it's a paper survey in school similar to ours, so the methodology is the most similar of all the national surveys. And you can see here that for all substances measured and behaviors, Vernon is coming in below the state and the nation across the board. So this is, again, wonderful news for efforts done here in Vernon. We asked students about their perception of alcohol prevention strategies' effectiveness. And I have to say that we asked this question in many communities. And I often find that the students' perception of effective strategies is direct opposite of what we know in prevention science to be effective, except here. We know that strategies that have to do with policy enforcement and development are deemed quite effective. And the students have selected mostly strategies that have to do with policy. Right down to the breathalyzer use, high price came in high across the board, but not as high as some of the others. Checking identification and suspending one's driver's license. Alcohol education in school was included as well, so that shows that they do desire that to an extent. And of course, peers who don't drink came in high as well, with the two highest deemed policy initiatives. Bullying and harassment, and I actually would like to cite my notes so I can give you the definition, because I'm sure you're wondering what that was in the survey. It was defined as a person is bullied when he or she is exposed repeatedly and over time to negative actions on the part of one or more persons, and he or she has difficulty defending himself or herself. So that was our definition within the survey that was introduced in this section prior to the questions being asked. You can see that 20.4% of students in grades 6 through 8 and 12.8% of students in grades 9 through 12 report being bullied in school in the past 30 days. This is a trend that we find quite frequently where the middle school reports a higher incidence of bullying or harassment, and it reduces greatly in the high school grades. Across grades 6 through 12, bullying occurred most frequently in hallways or stairwells, the lunchroom, in class when a teacher was in the room, online or text messaging, or in class when a teacher was not in the room. So, this is not shocking to me either, and if anything, I was surprised to see that online and text messaging was lower than some of the other potential locations. It occurred least frequently in lunchroom, athletic fields, bathrooms, bus stop, or on the school bus. So these are just things to keep in mind when you think about strategies or policies or programming. Almost 50% of students in grades 6 through 12 and about 35% of students in grade 9 to 12 feel that teachers or other adults often or almost always try to stop bullying at school. And 32% of students in grades 6 through 8 and 16% of students in grade 9 through 12 feel that other students, meaning, often or almost always try to stop bullying at school, so intervening when their peers were having a problem. And then the next is regarding, as you can see, students' personal outlook and life. So the questions that are reflected here are how true you feel these things are for yourself. I feel safe at school. I try hard to do good work at school. Teachers and staff at my school encourage and support me to do my best. I believe my life is going in a positive direction, and I treat people with respect. So you can see across these indicators that overall, students are feeling safe at school. And in regard to the tragedy last year in Newtown, we have seen consistently that our rates about feeling safe at school in all of our communities have remained consistent, which is something that is quite comforting as we think about planning ahead and school safety in general. And it seems as though Vernon schools fall right in line with where other schools do. Students are quite motivated to do their work, with high school students saying a 93% feel that way and 96% of middle school students feel that way. In the middle school, 88% of students feel they're supported, and in the high school, 77%. And life is going in a positive direction is pretty close for middle school and high school as well. And they treat people with respect, which over 90% of all students feel that way. I do want to note that one thing we asked in the survey that wasn't outlined in this presentation was students feeling sad most of the time. And I think it's a really important indicator when we look at this personal outlook. And consistent with other communities, 20% overall of the student body reported that much of the time they feel sad. So it's something to think about, not for the schools, because the purpose of this data is not to point fingers at what the school needs to or does not need to do, but just in general as a community, and certainly working with the Youth Service Bureau about that, looking at strategies and programming. And then parent-student relationships. Starting with, when I'm away from home, my parents and guardians know where I am and who I am with. I share my thoughts and feelings with my parents and guardians. My parents and guardians participate in activities at schools, including attendance at school events. If I break one of my parent or guardian's rules, I am usually disciplined, and I feel very close to my parent or guardian. So the numbers are, quite self-explanatory in the charts, with students reporting feeling very close to their parents, parents knowing who their children are with and where they are, and the lowest reporting that parent participation in school activities is on the lower end, and that's not uncommon to see, given the state of working parents, and we usually see a little bit of a decline just naturally from middle school to high school in that, and it's not that significant here. So that is my presentation. I certainly can try to answer any questions that you have, and we have to make sure that we acknowledge, all those who supported the survey process, including Vernon Youth Services and this Board of Education, Dr. Conway, and this, faculty and staff at the Center Middle School and High School for all of their work.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Bob? Mr. Vernon?
First, I'd like to thank you for your efforts. It was a very extensive survey, so I was spending a good amount of time going through it. And the erase region, you mentioned various communities. What communities is that composed of, if I might ask?
We start at the northern end with Tolland, Summers, Stafford. We have Manchester, Vernon, East Hartford, Andover, Hebron, Marlborough, Bolton, South Windsor, Ellington, and I must be missing some, Enfield. Thank you. I think that would be the last one.
Okay. Was there any, and I didn't see it, and maybe I missed it, but is there any information with regard to, in the survey, whether there was parental usage in some of these, whether it's alcohol or marijuana, and whether that was a permissiveness that allowed the student to feel it was okay to use something that is illegal or frowned upon?
We don't ask about parents' use, but we do ask students if there is concern or if they felt that there was use in the home that significantly impacted work or family life. And I can't remember the exact word within the full survey report, but I do recall looking at it today, and approximately 25% of all students grades 6 through 12 reported that there was some sort of substance abuse in the home that resulted in some sort of problem, which is consistent with the alcoholism rates for the nation are 25% of the population. So it's consistent with that. And we find in other towns it's absolutely consistent with what was reported just now.
Okay. And one final question, if I might. Why would you attribute that Vernon has had such a good drop over the years? I mean, is that really consistent in all demographics within not only Vernon but other towns and regionally and nationally, or is that, so I better understand that, is that, are we going with the trend or are we bucking the trend?
The trend is down, which is great news. We did just complete Ellington's report, so your neighboring community had a similar trend. And there's been a lot of funding over the last probably 5 to 7 years put into communities really focusing on underage drinking reduction, as well as other drugs, particularly prescription drugs. And Vernon, via Erase and other partners throughout the state, has received a significant amount of funds to really focus in those efforts and focus on effective evidence-based prevention strategies in addition to trying to build their coalition. And Ellington has done the same. I can't say it's causal because we don't have that kind of study done here to link programs right back to these use rates. But I can say that given the nature of how much money has gone in, how much effort, and there's 2 towns seeing a similar trend right next to one another, I'd like to think it's because of that emphasis and the transition to using evidence-based strategies rather than, 10 to 12 to 15 years ago, we did more classroom-style intervention for prevention. We might do some alternative activities, and those have their value. But shifting to things that have a public health approach, like policy enforcement, I think makes a significant impact, and it sends a message to youth as well.
Thank you.
Mrs. Bush?
How many of the communities have like a DARE or a program in place to educate the students on the negative, the problems with using drugs or alcohol and things like that?
I'm not positive the number of DARE officers in the region that we serve. DARE has been in flux over the last several years, and because of budget cuts, I know that some have been pulled out, the DARE officers, and some have been put back in. But I would say of the 15 communities, which is actually 13 school systems I work with, because we do have a regional school district in there, I would say 7 to 8 are highly invested and have great capacity to focus at the school and community level on substance abuse prevention. And then there's some that lack sort of the community infrastructure, like a youth service bureau was one great example, to really have an impact of getting that information out. A lot also varies with curricula in each school. Some have a real emphasis on health education and some do not. And some of that has to do with funding, of course.
Can I just ask one more thing? You said you had a regional district. I know the regional district. Did you survey the 6th grade, or did you just do the 7th and 8th grade?
I'm trying to remember because it's been several years. In that, are we referring to Andover, Hebron, and Marlboro? Is there 6th grade? Do you know what school
It's
they're
in the elementary schools.
We did the 6th grade. I'm pretty sure, but I can't promise you that 100%.
I just want to make sure we were getting a good sampling of, making sure we're not just focusing on the 7th and 8th and things like that, because you want to see where they are in the 6th grade.
That's why we like to start at 6th, because you can see, and when you look at the full report, if you haven't already, you can see the significant leaps between grades that occur, and that's consistent in other communities as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Olivia?
As a student, I think it might be helpful for me to put my 2 cents in, just because I live this kind of every day, this environment. If you get the chance, I encourage you all to just put on like jeans and a t-shirt and walk through the hallways of RHS and really get a feel for the school without your administrative badges to show people, all right, keep your voices down or heads down, and try to look respectful without an escort, without a Mr. Rocket. And really get a feel for the school. Some hallways are going to go down and you can barely get past the kids because they're all just blocking the hallway, whereas some, and in those you might hear about, drugs or what happened over the weekend at this crazy party. And but I would say, as you walk down the hallways and you listen to different conversations or you see different people, when I walk down the hallway in school, I'm able to walk down the hallway and kind of point out maybe 1 in every 4 kids who's either is abusing one of these substances. And it's not really hidden at school, kids just kind of know, it's like that 6th sense. So I just thought it's a good idea to try to do that at some point. I know you guys kind of have your own lives to lead, but I think it would give you a really good grasp of the school. If you even just go to school in the morning between 7 and 7:30, there are kids who smoke in the front by the student parking lot, smoking cigarettes in the morning, and then there are kids in the student parking lot who smoke cigarettes, and the other day I saw someone smoking something that definitely wasn't legal. And so it's very present if you don't have to look hard to see it. Also, to be critical of the data, although I was very happy that it actually kind of represents what I see every day, just keep in mind that I believe we did this survey during advisee. I kind of remember it, and while it was optional, a lot of the kids whose data you may actually want, the ones who do abuse substances and deal with these kind of things, opted out of it, which is understandable, but not because they felt uncomfortable, but because they didn't care. And an advisee, it wasn't really enforced, you know what I'm saying? all right, guys, you know, it was kind of a struggle, even to get people's attention. In health class, I know that some of the curriculum, we do deal with drugs and alcohol, but I don't know how effective it is, simply because it's very, you know, the teacher stands up in front of you and tells you that this is bad, this is what happens, and I know that it really had no impact on a lot of my friends. In fact, some of my friends started abusing these substances while we were learning about them in health class. And they're like, you know, it's all lies, they're just telling us that to, like, you know, keep us away from all of the stuff that they think is bad. And it sounds like a really bad conspiracy theory, but, you know, it really is the mindset of the students. I'd like to just point out that maybe the decline that we see, the trend decline in abuse, or substance abuse, there you go, I think would have a lot to do with the community as a whole. Cigarettes and smoking and alcohol is no longer really portrayed as cool. So like in commercials, you're not going to see someone smoking a cigarette. And so like the social media and just the way that the society views it these days, I think will have a tremendous impact on that, even though the numbers are still pretty shocking for people under 18. And lastly, sorry, that's a lot, the DARE program that you mentioned. My older sister, she's 4 years older than I am, had the opportunity to have Officer Dan as her DARE officer. And between the years that I would have had it, it was taken out of the program, and I don't even know what DARE stands for. I know it starts with drugs, and that's really it. So I think it's a really good program. After working in the summer camps, especially ones with some kids who come for $15 a week and get free lunch because they, you know, they qualify for that. I think having someone like that as a role model within the school system would really help them kind of beat the odds if they do have this at home, which I know a lot of them do. So I know we have a lot to look at for the budget, but I think that would be a really good thing to keep your eye on and see if you could squeeze it in, because I know a lot of our kids really need this program to set a good role model and just know from an early age what not to do, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just respond? I just want to tell you that we are restarting the officer-friendly program in the schools starting next year. This year in January. Oh, May, sorry, I knew it was. So that is a positive thing, but the police department has to fund either DARE or officer-friendly. Just Mr. Stansky.
Olivia's points actually made me think of a good question. You said that it was optional, and obviously some students opted out. Do we have data on how many students opted out?
I can't tell you grade by grade how many opted out specifically. I can tell you by grade the response rate, and the highest was in the 6th grade, not surprising, at 93.5% response. The lowest being the 11th grade at 74.5%. And then, I do know that 2.4% of the surveys that came back, which was a total of 35, were omitted because of their discrepancy. So if you say you use every drug every day, we throw it out. That's just always how it's been. It's not realistic. You wouldn't be alive, to be quite honest, or in school for that matter. So the full report, I don't want to go into each grade because I'm sure you have other things on your agenda item, but the full report on page 4 shows grade by grade the sample count, population count, and response rate.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
We will move on to item 5.2, opportunity to request additional information regarding the 2014-15 proposed Board of Education budget. Mr. Stanton.
So, to be honest, I'm not sure exactly how much detail you want me to go into here with these questions, but I have a few. I would like to see a summary of all staff increases and decreases. Maybe a single-page summary. You referenced in the presentation that there were decreases that offset some of that other money, and I'd like to get an understanding of what we're looking at for totals there. I'd also like a clear understanding of why the town data processing fee went up so considerably. That's a huge amount of money. And I am very curious, and this may be something that has to be discussed in executive session, I'm not sure, but with the change to the DPW director's structure, the fact that we are paying the town for his fees now, which I actually really appreciate because that was what we were going to do originally. I would like to understand how that changes the contract, because up to this point he has been an actual employee of the Board of Education, and we've paid into things like his retirement account, so I'd like to understand how that changes. And the substitute teachers and temporary salary line items were fairly significant to me, and I'd like to get a better understanding of those increases. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mrs. Bush?
I'd like to see the current class sizes and the projected enrollment for next year, so that we can see where we are and to make sure we're within the allotted class sizes that we try to have.
Anyone else have any questions at this time? Did you have any?
Not a question, I do have some. Based on our agenda that we do have question and answers at the end of the budget sessions, from our handout, as Mr. Lenton pointed out earlier to us, if we could add to the special meeting, we have to post the agenda to have open public comment as the first thing we do on Wednesday night, and then maybe if we still finish with a community comment, that would be appropriate. I don't know if we need to do that in a motion. Okay.
Any other questions at this time? If you do have questions for Dr. Conway, please email them to her so she has time to prepare answers, hopefully either for this workshop or the next one, depending on how extensive your questions are. But it's helpful if she has them in advance and she has time to prepare them. Thank you. Item 5.3, Board of Education Technology Committee report. Chair, Mrs. Bush.
Yes, we met on January 6th. In attendance was Steve Linton, Mr. Stanzel, and myself, Dr. Conway, Kevin Malloy, and basically Dr. Conway alluded to the main gist of our discussion was the teacher laptops, that we would be going for a lease, and we did all agree that that would be a very positive thing for the board to do to get the consistency in the technology. The second thing that we did discuss was the internet connectivity at the middle school, and that was something I know that is something we had planned to do, and it would be something that we'd really like to do, and we would support that. I just want to, one reservation is we have to give and take a little, so we're going to have to work to fit that in, because I think it would be very important, and the committee agreed. And that was basically, and we did talk about that we did get the technology grant, which really was a positive thing. And it was announced at was that announced at the CABE convention? Yeah. So we were very pleased to hear that. And that was our meeting. Any questions?
To the chair, presumably most of the laptops would continue to be a Windows-based operating system?
That we did discuss that they would actually be Chromebooks.
Chromebooks?
Chromebooks, no? I'm sorry, the teachers would not be Chromebooks, they would be Windows-based, they're not Apple-based.
Okay. And, since you're talking about a 5-year program, obviously you want to have peers that are capable at the 4 to 5 year mark without overspending, getting too much, that teachers may or may not need. When you evaluate each teacher based on the kind of requirements that they would have in terms of, say, the amount of memory and hard drive space and graphics and that kind of thing, or is it just going to be a more or less a hand them out randomly?
No, they would be a consistent model. So the teachers would be getting something, they would all be the same, they would meet the requirements of the teachers from what I understood Mr. Lemoy was speaking about. And he would be the judge on what the base model would be that they would be giving to the teachers.
I just the concern that, if you're doing most like word processing, higher power computers might not be as appropriate, while if you're doing graphics.
Mr. Lemoy is here, if that would help.
Come on up, I didn't see you there.
Would you like to come forward?
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Basically, the model would be identical across the board, and to your point about maintaining viability in year 4 and 5, these particular models are Core i5 with 8 gig of memory, and that's going to give them the longevity that they need to run Windows and potentially in the future maybe even Windows 8 if we so decide to move to that environment.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? I just have a question about the leasing. You mentioned a 5-year lease. Is it lease to own, or would you just,
No, it would
after
be
5 years, you'd get new ones and continue to lease?
turn it in and continue to lease. And we would be able to keep up with the technology. And these would be for, especially because a lot of the classrooms are now getting smart technology and things like that. So you really need to have a computer that's not, very, very old, so that they can run these smart technologies.
That's what I was hoping. I just wanted to make sure.
And, we had talked about taking and asking the town to facilitate the lease for us, because we as a board cannot lease items.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to the Board of Education Finance Committee report.
Thank you. I'll turn this over to Mr. Picaro in a moment. The board has, the Finance Committee has met, however, and discussed it in quite a bit of detail. And I'm hoping board members have had an opportunity to look through it. I know that there are 2 amendments that are action items that Mr. Picaro will bring forward, but otherwise, I'm sure he'll take questions on any area.
Thank you, Dr. Conway, to you, Madam Chair. Again, just to hit the highlights, as Dr. Conway had stated, we'll start with the executive summary of account balances, which is Exhibit A in your handout 5.4. Again, we're continuing with the executive summary format, which provides the board and the public with full transparency of all of our accounts, local accounts, grant accounts, any of our student activity accounts, special accounts such as our food and nutrition services accounts, our education capital non-recurring fund, as well as other at the very bottom, which is transportation deductions, and that has directly to do with our ability to withhold payments, or you can call them fines, consistent with our new transportation contract if certain deliverables are not being met. Where I'd like to draw your attention in summary is to the year-to-date budget report, which is Exhibit B. We are compelled under our new procedures that we've implemented as a board to ensure that our budget line items do not go negative. So let me start by providing a summary, and then we could look at some of the transfers and amendment requests to balance those line items that have gone negative at this point in the fiscal year. In summary, we have spent we have encumbered and spent 95.2% of our total budget. And I'd like to add to that that does not include significant line items such as payroll taxes in the ballpark of around $386,000, coaching stipends around $148,000, our magnet school tuition in total of $636,000 at the time of this report, our utility accounts in the ballpark of around $540,000, and our substitute teacher line item about $148,000. So if you were to include those as being anticipated to be fully expended, which we fully do, as an encumbrance, it really brings our margin down to about $300,000, give or take, in operating funds to get us through the end of the fiscal year, which sounds like a lot of money, but at this point in the fiscal year can go very quickly. Again, I'd like to echo a comment Dr. Conway had made earlier in her budget presentation. We do expect to end in the black this fiscal year, assuming that there won't be any catastrophic events that would cause us to have to dip into those funds, but we'll keep a close eye on that and keep the board informed as we go forward. In your budget packet, there are several budget transfers and 2 amendments. The amendments by policy are the ones that the board has to take action on in order for us to move those funds. The transfers are processed administratively for new board members. And so I'm going to jump, if I may, to Exhibit I while we're on the year-to-date budget report.
And Ms. Procaro, if I may, that's the 16th white page in, I'm going to flip 16 papers. That's the 16th page. Sorry about that.
Thank you. So while folks are getting there, the first 2 are the amendments. The remaining under Exhibit I are all the budget transfers that have already been processed to keep our accounts balanced. The first exhibit is to transfer funds from the painter salary account. If you recall, because of the budget freeze, our painter had retired, and we chose as a cost savings measure, cost containment measure, to not refill that position at this point in time. And so there are funds in that account that are available that we're requesting the board approve and take action on to offset unbudgeted expenditures for Andrews Technology, which is our monthly time and attendance system charge. Creative Financial, this is a temporary payroll position services. And CenturyLink Services, which is for employee background checks. And that was a charge that we had to make on our purchasing card as required to do background checks. The second amendment is a budget amendment to transfer funds from various accounts to cover overages in Northeast School for a Teacher account, to cover the cost of our DPW agreement for services, and 2 degree changes for staff in the guidance department. And the remaining are transfers. So I would ask through the chair if the board would be willing to take action on those 2 amendments so that we can balance those line items accordingly in our budget.
Mr. Holt.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the budget amendment request, Exhibit I, that Mr. Picaro just spoke of.
Mr. Kemp? Second. Any questions or comments? Mr. Stansel?
I'm just curious on the second amendment for the second exhibit. What was the significant increase in classroom teachers at NES?
If I may, the total account was under budgeted on that particular line item. We'll have to look at the details to give you the explanation by teacher as to what the cost may have been for that. But it could have been degree changes, it could have been various factors in there. We can get you that information.
Thank you, I appreciate it. It's a pretty significant difference.
Sir.
Any other questions? Okay, motion on the floor to approve these budget requests, amendment requests. All those in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you. Continuing with the highlights through the chair. If I can draw your attention to our Education Capital Non-Reoccurring Fund, that is Exhibit C in your handout. And very briefly, I'm pleased to report that due to the collaborative relationship we have with our Department of Public Works department, as well as coming under some of our original estimates for the work that we had originally been funds appropriated for, you'll see a listing there of completed projects and the unexpended appropriation amount that coincides with each of those projects, totaling $90,365.61. And the letter included in your exhibit asked and requested the town, which was subsequently approved by Mr. Ludicky, our finance officer, to return those funds to our available balance. So if you look at the summary report of $119,000 and change, you can add the $90,365 and change to that, bringing our balance slightly over $200,000 in capital non-recurring funds, which is good news because when we share our 6-year capital plan, there's quite a few projects in there that can benefit from those funds. Again, very briefly, our magnet school tuition update has not changed since the last report from Mr. Burt. I would like to draw your attention to the opportunity that we had to reduce the town's education cost share to offset some of our magnet school tuitions, which we chose, of course, not to exercise that function, and the town's revenue estimates for that line item will remain whole. There is a special education update included in your packet, Exhibit F, that's showing that our budgeted amount compared to what our projected expenditures, including our excess cost reimbursement, will bring our anticipated balance to a little over $100,000 at the end of the fiscal year, but there's a note from Mrs. Buell there that by the end of this month, there could be as much as $90,000 in fees that we will not have to pay, so that'll certainly bring us closer to the black, and that's very good news at keeping us above water through the end of the fiscal year. Revenue estimates are in Exhibit G in your handout, and I think a better way to look at that is the handout that the superintendent had presented tonight, so that you can see what our estimates for the fiscal year collected are. And so if you wouldn't mind taking a look at that, you can see side by side what the projected revenue estimates were of the town versus what our estimates are actually for the remaining of the fiscal year, and the sum total of that is significantly under what the town's revenue estimates were. We believe primarily because some of the estimates were set without our input, but as the superintendent had specified tonight, we have submitted our new revised revenue estimates for the upcoming fiscal year, and we're grateful to have that input so we can get these numbers to be closer to what they actually will be. Again, very briefly, I'm just going to hit a couple more highlights and conclude and open for questions. If we look at the Uniform Chart of Accounts, this is going to be a huge undertaking for our district and all the districts across the state. Essentially, what the State Department of Education has chosen as the preferred strategy to conversations that we've had with the State Department and that we've shared with the board over the past couple of years is that they're going to be going with a mapping strategy so that basically we don't need to change our chart of accounts. And that's good news because that would have been a lot of work and would have raised a lot of audit concerns. But what we do need to do is map our accounts to whatever uniform chart of accounts the State Department of Education is going to adopt. Once we do that once, all future reports that we submit to the State Department of Ed will be uploaded without any conversion from the district manually. It will happen automatically. And the ultimate goal here is to have better reporting, better access to data in a more timely manner through the State Department of Education. So as a concrete example for my office, the ED-001 report that we have to file every year would just be a matter of exporting data from our Munis financial system and then importing it into this new Uniform Chart of Account system that'll be housed at the State Department of Education without us having to go through the month's worth of calculations and data crunching that we have to do now. So good news on that front and more to follow. We talked about the budget transfer and amendment request. Our single audit update, we have completed the annual audit or the single audit that's required for the town and the board to have to go through. I would like to report to you that there were 4 findings for the Vernon Board of Education. 3 of the findings were related to special education Medicaid reports, and 1 of them was related to special education transportation. We have not included the findings in the packet because we're in the process of addressing them in our companion letter, which will indicate what our corrective action plan will be, and we'll certainly share that with you when we have an opportunity to share that with the town as well. Capital Region Education Council, we were asked to pay bills. They probably went through their own internal or external audit as well. And Mr. Burt's office received some bills for prior fiscal years, and they asked, would you mind paying these, giving us the option not to pay them. Obviously, we chose not to pay them because our fiscal year closes and those funds don't carry forward. So we thought it'd be worth sharing that those bills will not get paid, but we were asked for that option. We keep the FICA alternative plan on the radar screen, working with the town to keep that moving, hopefully yielding substantial savings. And phone line audit, the superintendent had talked about next year's budget, we hope to realize additional savings in our phone system. We've gone through our own internal audit. There are some savings that we'll be implementing to reduce excessive and unused lines as part of it, and some of our data lines as well. More to follow about that as we continue to roll out that process. Also included is the award letter for the school security grant. So we're pleased to report that we have received the official award letter and we're moving forward on those projects. And there's been a change to the school construction cost estimate policy, which is included for your reference as well. We have a series of competitive bids that will be going public over the next 4 weeks. So we'll have further information to share with you at the next finance report, but there's a listing of what those bids are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Picard? Maybe Mr. Kemp?
Exhibit A, Michael.
Yes, sir.
There's a reference to the costs associated with Title I, which is rather significant, given that the revised budget was 22.
Sure, if you'd like me to explain that. That's the amount of funding that we've received, but we have reasonable assurances from the state that we will receive additional funding, which is why there's a huge overage in that particular account as far as percent use. So what I wanted to share in this report, and I'm glad you asked that question, Mr. Kemp, is what we've actually received in funding and what's available for funding right now, real time, at the time the report was generated. And so for that particular account, we have those assurances that we will be receiving additional funding from the state so that we went ahead and made additional expenditures against those funds, but we fully expect them to be received from the state to offset those overages.
Well, expenditures doesn't necessarily cover the amount that we're looking at here that is in difference from where we'd like to be. So are you saying that those funds would basically cover the difference?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Turning the page to the back of the Exhibit A, there are a few questions that I have regarding the activity funds. You have an RHS activity fund of $226,000 listed here.
Yes.
Pretty significant amount of money. I'd like to understand it a little better. VCMS is $74,000. But curiously, the activity funds for each of the elementary schools are also listed, yet they vary quite a bit. And I'm wondering why an activity fund for Center Road School would be in the vicinity of $34,000 here, and each of the others would be $10,000 or less. Could you help me understand the difference in what an activity fund balance might consist of?
If I may address that, Mr. Kemp. At a high school, there is one fund with many, many sub-accounts. So it could be the class of 2016, the class of 2017. So all their dues, all their prom money, all their fundraising, the band, the Foreign Language Club, the National Honor Society, the field trip for Eastern States Exposition. It just goes on and on and on. So the funding, so any money, if I'm taking my class on a field trip, any money I collect goes directly into a student activity account for that field trip, and the check for the bus is paid out of that, the check for the admission to the museum is paid out of that, et cetera. So there are many, many, many accounts. I would hazard to guess that the class of 1995, 96, 97 are still active accounts that are there and are used for when the students have a reunion. So we have some dormant accounts as well. I know Mr. Picard has brought up a dormant account that was years old that was meant to offset, I think, tuition, to be a loaning account to students. So at a high school, there are many, many, many accounts there. At a middle school, there are some. They have clubs that all have their own accounts, whether for dues or supplies or whatever they've collected, fundraising, et cetera. The elementary, there are far fewer accounts. I'm sure there are field trip accounts. Every year, the 4th grade at Center Road goes to Sturbridge Village, and the 5th grade goes to the Science Museum. I'm sure those accounts are still active. and at times have quite a bit of money. If you're going coach bus for 200 fifth graders and you're going to Boston, there's probably at some point quite a bit of money in there. So a snapshot in time you may see. But there are all kinds of accounts. There may be memorial accounts. If a teacher has passed away and they've collected money and they've planted a tree, there may still be funding in that account. So that's why it would be far less at the elementary school, a little more at the middle, and quite a lot at the high school. I would expect most high school have about $250,000, sometimes over $3 in their accounts.
Okay, thank you. Just curiously, Talcottville still shows $47 and there's no Talcottville left, so maybe we could figure out how to capture that. All right, thank you. That covers A. I'd like to ask a general question on the following accounts. For instance, in the area of instructional supplies 56440, it shows that we have only expended 58% of that. And further, there are accounts on the final page that are to replace instructional equipment, non-instructional, and replace non-supplies. And what we have here are 26,000, 15,000 respectively. There is 103,000 in other supplies and materials, and 29,000, curiously, in land improvement, that represents only 3% was expended of what was requested. The computer equipment, there's, on the final part of that page, 24,000, 19,000, and computer software, I think that's an 18,000. So there's 50,000 there and 22,000 in computer supplies that we haven't spent yet, and I realize we've been in a freeze. But we have significant requests coming from the computer, in the computer arena, and yet there's funds that we haven't freed up yet. So are we budgeting next year appropriately, given that we have funds that we've approved from last year's budget and haven't spent yet, or not?
Thank you, through you, Mrs. Fisher. The budget is in a freeze, you are correct, and you will see in the proposed budget there are line items where it was asking for a piece of equipment, I don't know, a recorder of some kind. And you'll see that request coming in again for the exact same amount of money, because we are in a budget freeze and it has not been bought this year. We are planning, if there's anything that we can free up at the end of the year, obviously that's what we would purchase, is equipment that was requested, that was not done, that was not purchased. But otherwise, all of the funding that has been frozen is being used to offset our expected deficit in special education.
I was afraid you were going to say that, because what it says is we're budgeting in next year for what we won't be spending in freezing money this year, because we're going to use it to pay for the special ed deficit. Is that the unfortunate reality?
That is the unfortunate reality, yes.
So once again, our technology piece takes a hit because of the discrepancies in the special ed arena. I don't know that, I guess we just need to understand that and realize what we continue to do to our technology piece. All right. If you don't mind, while I turn the pages, Michael's been good enough to answer several of the questions in his presentation, not the least of which is the 90,000 in capital non-recurring. appreciate it if someone else had a question that they ask it while I move forward to some of the other pages where I have.
Does anybody else have any questions? No, David, you're
Not at the
on
moment.
the floor, but time is running out, David.
It is.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Well, I'll do my best. Okay, Michael, in the area where you budget for 65% of reimbursement, given that 65% planning is a pretty conservative amount, I don't recall what the recent experience is in special ed reimbursement percentage from the state. Could you help me with that?
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair. We continue to budget conservatively because all indications from the state show the variability of the excess cost reimbursement for special education and the capping of that account. So the guidance that we receive and the experiences that we've had, 65% is a safe place to be. Considering the shortfalls in our local budget accounts, that's supported by that estimate. So our experience last year, I don't recall exactly what it was down to the penny, but I believe it was about 72% reimbursement when it was all said and done. But I will verify that number and get back to you through the superintendent.
Well, to the extent that we did receive a higher percentage like that, we might not have as large a deficit in special ed as what we're looking at, in other words?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And I hate to run out of time here.
You are out of time, David.
We're out of time. Would you like a motion to extend? Or would you like to, just so many budget transfers here, 9 of them, but
It's twice on any agenda item and not to exceed 5 minutes each time.
Yeah, I think we're beyond that, David. So we are going to move on. Okay, we're going to move on to item 5.5, which is the memorandum. Do we make a motion to move it to Mr. Holt?
Can I make a motion that we move 5.5 to after opportunities for questions from the press so that we can finish all the action? Oh, no, actually, we're going to have to take action on this when we come out of it.
We do have to.
So it doesn't make sense.
So do you want to go into executive session now? Still have to. All right, let's move into executive session now. We need a motion to go into executive session.
That would be my motion.
We do have 2 members of the press, which I appreciate. Actually, the other 2 agenda items.
Oh, well, that's true.
But we are going to take action on this at the end.
Yeah, so
Also,
you'll
if
be
there is-
ready to back out on camera.
Well, I mean, we could do item 7.0 if the press would like to ask questions now and not stay. Okay, do you have any questions? No? All right, then we will move, we'll need a motion.
Motion to go into executive session.
Is there a second?
Second.
And invite superintendent?
Inviting the
And
superintendent.
Mr. Picard? Okay, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, we're going to go into executive session now.
because that's what should be happening. It's not gonna kill them, it's gonna kill the cost.
Yes, I'd like to make the motion that the Board of Education approve the amendments as discussed in executive session and replace Appendix A in the current contract between the Vernon Board of Education and Local 818 of the Council Number 4, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees.
Is there a second? Mr. Galena? Any questions or comments? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to item 6.0 to review and update the Board of Education calendar. We'll start with 6.1, the dates for the Lighthouse Project workshops.
We had, if I may, Mrs. Fisher, we had proposed a set of dates. There was a revised copy with one change in your packet this evening. The first date, Mr. Caruso could not make, and so we're actually the first board to, the times, I'm sorry, and he indicated that it is a full 3-hour training each time, and so you certainly can go back to 7 o'clock if you wish. But we felt, 6 o'clock, and people just try to get here as quickly as they possibly can, because 10 o'clock gets kind of late, especially with the number of days the board is already out. So this is the Mondays are the third Monday. The recommendation was to make it a board meeting night on an off week. And so we thought the middle Monday of the month.
Has everybody had the opportunity to check their calendars to see if those dates work?
No. So it's February 19th that is the good one?
That's the first one.
That's
Yeah,
the
all of
first
them
one.
are
All the dates
we've got a new one in your folder.
Just making sure I got the right one.
Right,
Yes.
right, that's,
Yes.
so we'll go with these dates then? Anybody?
Well, I hate to be the,
6 o'clock is tough. Is that
well, no, that's, the 19th is the problem,
the 19th?
yeah.
That would be the first one.
But for the
We
good
could,
of the body, I'll take one for the team.
It's just hard coordinating with Mr.
Yeah,
Caruso,
exactly.
because he's
That's-
out
that's-
with a
that's
lot
what-
of work, right? I think we'll have to
I
leave it.
can look for another date.
Or we could try it, and
We
if
can
we
try it.
can't, then we'll
Yeah.
stick with this.
No, we'll
Okay.
go with this.
Okay. Are there any other changes or updates to the Board of Ed calendar? You ready? No? All right. And we'll go to item 7.0 one more time, opportunity for questions from the press on any of the items. All right, then we have one last motion. Anyone? Mrs. Bush,
Move to adjourn.
is there a second? Mr. Stansel, all those in